I remember that morning with a clarity that still unsettles me. The boardroom of Helixion Technologies was not just a meeting space. It was a theater designed to remind everyone who stepped inside that they were playing on a stage built for power. The walls were tall sheets of glass, polished until they gleamed like frozen water. Outside stretched the skyline of New York, the steel towers thrusting into a gray sky that threatened rain. From 32 floors above the street, the city looked like an intricate circuit board. Cars streamed through avenues like flickering signals, stoplights pulsed like glowing nodes, and the faint movement of people appeared like patterns of current running beneath us. I had stood in that room before, many times. I had presented complex diagrams of Orion's architecture to executives who did not understand half of what I was saying, but nodded anyway because they could see the numbers. Revenue projections, market share, valuations that made their eyes gleam with greed. I had argued for budgets, explained risks, and defended my team. Yet on that morning, the air carried a different weight. It was as if the molecules themselves were arranged against me, thick with tension, heavy with expectation. I walked in and knew, before a single word had been spoken, that I was about to be cornered. The first thing I noticed was not Victor Cross, though he sat at the head of the table like a general in his command post. Nor was it the cluster of board members whispering at each other, their faces pale with nerves they tried to disguise as detachment. What struck me most was Damien. He leaned back in his chair, one arm thrown casually along the rest, as if this entire confrontation was his idea of sport. His dark hair was sculpted to perfection, every strand in place, his suit tailored so sharply that it could cut glass. His eyes followed me from the moment I entered the room, cold, calculating, but also taunting, as though he already saw me as prey he had trapped. There is something unique about being underestimated. It has a flavor, like iron on your tongue. I could taste it when he looked at me, the same flavor I had known in university when male colleagues assumed I was the assistant, not the engineer. The same taste from conferences where investors directed their questions to my male interns instead of me. That morning in the boardroom, the taste returned, stronger, laced with menace. "Mariana," Victor said, his voice even, practiced, the voice of a man who had been navigating corporate waters for decades. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice." I inclined my head, setting my bag down near my chair. I did not sit immediately. I let my eyes travel over the documents spread across the table, the careful arrangement of bottled water, the legal counsel shifting uncomfortably near the far end. Everything about the room told me this was not a discussion. It was an ambush. When I finally sat, Damien moved. He slid a folder across the polished wood with a slow push, his fingers brushing the leather edge as though savoring the gesture. The sound of it scraping the surface echoed, small but sharp like the strike of a match. I opened it. The letters swam for a moment, black ink against white, clean lines of legal prose that carried the weight of betrayal. A technology transfer agreement. Not a negotiation, not an offer, but a demand. Assign all rights of my patents to Helixion for a one-time payment that would not have covered even a fraction of the electricity bills spent training Orion's models. $50,000. That was the number they believed my life's work was worth. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. I lifted my gaze slowly, first to Victor, who avoided meeting my eyes, and then to Damien. He smiled, not warmly, but with the satisfaction of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "We have been reviewing the Orion infrastructure," he said. His tone was smooth, trained in boardrooms and at expensive schools, but underneath was the arrogance of entitlement. "We have identified dependencies that expose us to risk. This transfer will simplify things." I closed the folder without looking again. "Simplify," I repeated, my voice steady. Victor leaned forward slightly. "Investors are wary of external ownership, Mariana. We are about to launch a multi-billion-dollar product. We cannot afford liability issues." External. The word stung, sharp as a blade. I had built Orion before Helixion even knew what it was. My patents were mine, registered years before they had hired me. The company did not exist inside Orion. Orion existed because of me. I pushed the folder back across the table. "No." The room seemed to freeze. A cough from the far end was quickly smothered. The tension shifted, thickened. Damien leaned forward, elbows resting on the wood, eyes glinting with challenge. "You think you can refuse?" he asked. His voice had lost the mask of politeness. Now it carried sharpness, venom. "You are here because we allow it. Without Helixion, you are nothing more than a clever coder with a resume. Do you truly believe you can hold the future of artificial intelligence hostage by yourself?" I locked my gaze on his. I do not believe it, I know it. Orion runs because of me. Without my patents, you have no product. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging glances they thought I could not see. Victor's hands twitched against the table, the only crack in his carefully composed mask. Damien's lips curved into a grin, slow, deliberate, dangerous. He leaned closer, his voice dropping so everyone could hear. You think you can last in this industry? Do you think your name matters? I can erase you with a single whisper. One call and recruiters will not return your emails. Investors will close their doors. Colleagues will distance themselves. Your career will vanish, and all anyone will remember is that you were reckless enough to defy Heliction. The words slid into the room like poison, seeping into every corner. I felt them coil around my spine, but instead of fear, I felt heat, steady and fierce. I had heard threats before. I had been underestimated before, but never like this. I sat back, folded my hands on my lap, and smiled. It was not a soft smile. It was a blade wrapped in silk. Whisper as loud as you want, Damien, because I do not break as easily as you think. The silence that followed was heavier than anything said. The board members stared at the table, unwilling to intervene. Victor's jaw tightened, the faint lines of stress deepening around his mouth. Damien's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, then returned, sharp and cold. Victor finally cleared his throat, his voice clipped. We will revisit this discussion. Think carefully, Mariana. Think about your future. The meeting ended as suddenly as it had begun. Papers were gathered, chairs scraped back, and one by one the others filed out, their eyes carefully avoiding mine. I remained seated until the last of them had gone. My coffee, untouched, sat cooling beside me. I picked it up finally, took a sip. It was cold, bitter, but I welcomed the taste. When I rose, Damien was still in the corner, pretending to scroll through his phone. He did not look up as I passed, but I felt his gaze trail after me, burning against my back like fire. I left the boardroom with steady steps, but inside, I knew. This was no longer just a professional disagreement. It was not a negotiation about ownership. It was war. The corridor outside the boardroom was colder than I remembered. Air conditioning hummed through the vents, carrying with it the sterile scent of metal and glass polish. My heels clicked against the marble floor with a sound that seemed too loud, too defiant, as though the building itself disapproved of my presence. I held my coffee cup in one hand, though it was nearly empty, more a prop than a drink. My other hand clenched into a fist at my side. I had known Heliction would test me eventually. No company tolerates being dependent on one person, no matter how valuable. But I had not expected them to strike so openly, so brazenly, in a boardroom filled with witnesses. They had not even tried to disguise the attempt as collaboration. They had tried to strip me of everything in broad daylight. My reflection glared back at me from the glass walls as I passed. My face looked calm, but my eyes burned with something fierce. I thought of my years hunched over monitors in cramped apartments, scribbling neural structures on whiteboards, waking up with equations etched into my dreams. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice had built Orion into what it was, and now they wanted to erase me with the stroke of a pen. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Inside, the mirrored walls multiplied my image. For a moment, it looked like a dozen versions of me stood together. Each one wore the same expression, cold, unyielding. As the elevator descended, I thought of Damien's words. He had promised he could destroy me with whispers. Perhaps he believed it. Perhaps he believed the weight of his family name, the reach of his father's empire, would be enough to crush me. But he did not understand me. He had grown up with doors held open. I had grown up kicking them down. When the doors opened to the main floor, the hum of activity greeted me. Engineers clustered around monitors, voices low and hurried, the rhythm of code filling the air. The Orion floor had always felt like a second home to me. The walls were lined with glass partitions etched with sketches of data flows, diagrams of algorithms, notes scribbled hastily during late-night breakthroughs. It was messy, imperfect, alive. Unlike the polished emptiness of the executive floor above, this place pulsed with energy. Marcus looked up from his desk as I entered. He had been with me since the early days, back when Orion was little more than an idea that lived inside my notebooks. His dark eyes studied me for a moment, then flicked toward the elevator as though he could still see Damien's shadow trailing after me. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I set the empty coffee cup down on his desk. "They want my patents," I said simply. His jaw tightened. "Of course they do. They think I will hand them over for scraps." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I do not know you very well. I almost smiled, but the weight in my chest was too heavy. Instead, I sank into the chair beside his desk and rubbed my temples. Around us, the team kept working, but I could feel their attention on me. They had seen the way I left the boardroom. They had seen the storm gathering in my eyes. I exhaled slowly. It is not just the Pats. Damien made it clear. He wants me gone. He wants me erased. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. He will try. But you built Orion. Every line, every framework, every optimization. Without you, they cannot move forward. That is what terrifies them, I said softly. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of machines filling the space. The glow of monitors painted shifting patterns across the glass walls. I watched the data streams flow across the screens, lines of numbers and graphs that represented months of work, years of vision. Orion was not just code. It was the culmination of everything I had ever believed in, intelligence that could adapt, learn, and transform. To me, it was not only technology. It was proof of what a single mind could accomplish when no one else believed. But in the boardroom upstairs, they did not see vision. They saw leverage. I pushed myself up from the chair. I need to check the servers. Marcus frowned. Now. I crossed the floor toward the east wing where the Orion servers thrummed quietly behind locked glass. I swiped my badge, the door clicking open, the scent of cool air and metal rushing out to meet me. The rack stood tall, blinking with green and amber lights, the heartbeat of the project. I rested my palm against one of the cold surfaces, feeling the vibration of the fans through the metal. For a moment, I closed my eyes. This was mine. Every calculation, every pathway, every connection inside these machines had been carved from my imagination, and now I needed to protect it. I opened my laptop and logged into the core architecture. The system greeted me with familiar prompts, the command lines scrolling across the screen like old friends. I typed quickly, pulling logs, reviewing access patterns. My breath slowed as I scrolled through the data. At first, everything seemed normal. Then I saw it. A series of pings, subtle but irregular, from an account that should not have been anywhere near the core files. My eyes narrowed. It was late-night activity, buried beneath routine processes, but unmistakable. Someone had been poking around in Orion's architecture. Someone had touched my work. The bile rose in my throat. I traced the credentials, fingers moving quickly over the keys. The trail led back to a junior engineer, someone who should never have had that clearance. But I knew it was not him. No junior engineer acted alone. And standing behind him, I could imagine it clearly. Damien, arms folded, watching, directing, using pawns to do the work he could not. I snapped my laptop shut and leaned back against the cold metal rack. My heart pounded in my chest, anger and clarity mixing until I could barely tell one from the other. It was happening already. He had not wasted a single day. When I left the server room, the office floor seemed different. The monitors hummed the same, the lights glowed the same, but everything had sharpened as though the entire space had become hostile territory. I could feel unseen eyes watching, waiting, measuring. Marcus intercepted me at my desk. "What did you find?" "They are already trying," I said flatly. He swore under his breath. "Damien?" "Of course." His hands clenched at his sides. "What are you going to do?" I stared at my monitor, the familiar login screen glowing back at me. My reflection wavered in its light. My voice was calm when I answered. "I am going to fight." Night at Heliction never truly felt like night. The lights inside the building glowed with a cold white brilliance that erased shadows but never warmth. Past midnight, the main floor of the Orion division was nearly deserted, but the hum of servers and the faint flicker of screens kept the illusion that the place was alive. I had always loved working late, not because I craved exhaustion, but because the silence let me think. The city outside was a blur of neon, the sky smeared with clouds that reflected the glow of skyscrapers. Inside, only the machines kept me company. That night, I sat at my desk long after most of the engineers had gone home. The floor was scattered with empty coffee cups and discarded notebooks, small evidence of the wars fought on keyboards and in minds that never stopped calculating. I was debugging a particularly stubborn update when the first anomaly caught my eye. It was a whisper in the system, just a line of access logs that did not belong. I frowned, fingers pausing over the keyboard, then dove deeper. Orion's core architecture was locked tighter than any vault. Only 3 accounts in the entire company had full clearance, and one of them was mine. Yet here was an entry, almost invisible, creeping into directories where no one else should tread. At first, I thought it might be an error. Logs sometimes misfire, timestamps slip, glitches happen. But the more I traced, the clearer it became. Someone was inside my framework, moving carefully, methodically, not smashing or grabbing but extracting piece by piece as if stealing jewels from a crown. I opened a second monitor, bringing up security footage from the East Wing. The cameras flickered into focus, grainy but clear enough. My stomach twisted when I saw him. Tom Brennan, one of the junior engineers, hunched over his desk long after his shift had ended. His shoulders sloped forward, his fingers darted across the keyboard like a man in a hurry, and standing directly behind him, arms crossed, expression sharp with satisfaction, was Damian Cross. The sight was enough to freeze my blood. It was one thing to suspect, another to see it with my own eyes. Damian was not just scheming in boardrooms anymore. He was in the trenches, orchestrating theft with his own shadow looming over a frightened subordinate. I hit record. My phone camera captured the entire display. The security feed showing Damian and Tom, the logs scrolling across my terminal, every line of code being siphoned from the framework I had spent years building. My fingers shook as I typed commands, cross-referencing timestamps, ensuring every packet of evidence was pristine, undeniable. Each stolen file that appeared on my screen was a wound. Neural networks I had designed at 2 a.m. after weeks of trial and error. Optimization routines that had taken months to perfect. Pipelines for data ingestion that represented breakthroughs in efficiency. They were not just files. They were fragments of my life, of the hours I could never reclaim. And there he was, smirking in the background while someone else pulled them apart. The rage that burned inside me was unlike anything I had felt before. It was not hot and explosive. It was cold, sharp, a blade forged in silence. I knew in that moment that Damian had made a mistake. He believed I would panic, that I would crumble under the weight of betrayal. But he did not know me. He did not know what I had endured to get here. I sat back, forcing myself to breathe slowly. Panic was the enemy. Precision was my weapon. I cataloged everything, every access point, every file touched. I wrote it all down, creating a timeline that would hold up in any court before any judge. When I was done, I encrypted it and sent a copy to my personal drives, one hidden deep in a cloud service under an alias, another locked in an external device I kept in my bag. Insurance. The clock on the wall read 2:15 a.m. when I finally leaned back. The office was silent except for the low hum of machines. Outside the glass windows, the city was dark, a sea of lights fading into fog. My reflection looked back at me, pale, exhausted, but unbroken. I whispered to myself, though no one could hear, "You have no idea what you just started." The following morning, I was summoned to another meeting. The subject line of the email was short, cold. Strategy session, Orion. The conference room was already crowded when I arrived. Victor sat at the head again, expression carved from stone. Damian lounged beside him, smirk firmly in place. Around them were board members, lawyers, and a few faces I did not recognize, suits with polished shoes and hungry eyes. "Mariana," Victor said, gesturing toward an empty seat at the far end. His tone was smooth, but it carried the same undercurrent as the night before. Authority sharpened with warning. I sat, folding my hands neatly on the table. I had already guessed what was coming, but hearing it aloud still made bile rise in my throat. "We are accelerating Orion's launch," Victor said. "The market window is closing. We cannot afford delays." Damian leaned forward, voice rich with false concern. "During our review, some dependencies raised alarms. The current architecture relies heavily on proprietary elements. That is risky for us." I kept my face calm, though my hands itched to slam the folder back in his face. "Those elements are the patents I developed, licensed to Heliction under strict terms." "That has been the arrangement for 3 years. Victor's tone hardened. "Arrangements can change." Damian slid a document across the table. It was the same agreement from the night before, but this time with an audience. A technology transfer, all rights ceded, for $50,000. Insulting did not even begin to describe it. My voice cut through the room, steady but cold. "These patents were developed independently before Heliction. They belong to me. Forcing a transfer would be theft." Damian's grin widened. "Actually, we have been working on redundancies, alternatives. With or without you, Orion will move forward." That was when the pieces locked together. The late-night theft, Tom Brennan's desperate typing, Damian's looming presence. They were not just preparing alternatives. They were trying to clone my work, reverse engineer it until they could claim it as their own. I leaned back, meeting his eyes with a calmness I did not entirely feel. That would be patent infringement. Words hung heavy in the air. A few board members shifted, uncomfortable. The suits frowned, their hunger dulled by the taste of risk. Victor's gaze darkened. Are you threatening us, Mariana? I smiled faintly. No, I'm stating facts. Orion cannot launch without my technology, and if you try to replicate it, my lawyers will enjoy the fight. The silence stretched until Damien slammed his hand against the table. This is exactly the problem. Your arrogance. You seem to forget you are an employee here. And you forget, I said softly, that employment does not equal ownership of pre-existing intellectual property. My pulse raced, but I held his gaze until he looked away. The room felt like a battlefield, each word a weapon, each silence a landmine waiting to detonate. When the meeting finally broke, I gathered my notes slowly, deliberately, and walked out without glancing back. But in my chest, a steady drumbeat thundered. War had been declared, and this was only the beginning. The meeting ended, but the echoes stayed. Long after the boardroom had emptied, I still heard the weight of their words reverberating inside me. Arrangements can change. They had said it so casually, as if stripping me of my life's work was no different than changing office furniture. I walked back to my desk with careful steps, though inside my blood boiled. The office floor was buzzing again, the hum of keyboards filling the air, but I felt detached, as though I were watching through glass. My colleagues looked up when I passed, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. They had heard whispers, enough to sense that something had shifted. I dropped into my chair and opened my laptop, hands steady, mind sharp. If they thought they could corner me, they had underestimated the wrong woman. The first thing I did was pull up my patent documentation. Every file, every claim, every diagram of Orion's neural architecture that bore my name. 6 core patents, the spine of the system. I had memorized them years ago, but now I examined them again with new eyes, looking for gaps they might exploit, weaknesses they might twist. None, they were airtight, but airtight did not mean invulnerable. In court, even the strongest case could be dragged, delayed, bruised until exhaustion set in. I needed more than just patents. I needed undeniable proof. I inserted an external drive and began backing up everything. Not just the code, but the entire history of Orion's evolution. Emails, commit logs, timestamps that proved the exact moment I had created each component. Drafts scrawled at 3 a.m, prototype diagrams, fragments of whiteboard sketches captured on my phone. I encrypted it all and split it across 3 drives, one for me, one for my attorney, one hidden in a location no one at Heliction would ever reach. Paranoia? Maybe. But in this game, paranoia was survival. By the time I finished, the sun was bleeding pale, light across the skyline. New York stirred awake below, traffic honking faintly in the distance. My phone buzzed on the desk, a reminder that I was already late to call Rachel. Rachel Mears had been my intellectual property attorney for 3 years. She was sharp, relentless, and most importantly, she believed me. I dialed her number, the phone pressed cold against my ear. She picked up on the second ring. Mariana, do you know what time it is? Yes, I said, my voice flat. But you are going to want to hear this. 10 minutes later, I had laid it all out. The boardroom ambush, the transfer agreement, the midnight theft, Damien's looming figure on the security feed. I emailed her the evidence as we spoke, the files encrypted but clean, each one a nail in the coffin of Heliction's scheme. On the other end, Rachel whistled low. This is serious. If they launch Orion using your technology without proper licensing, you are looking at damages in the hundreds of millions, minimum. Possibly more if we prove malicious intent. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion pressing against me. They are not just trying to launch without me, they are trying to erase me. If I sign over the patents, I am gone. If I refuse, they try to steal it anyway. Rachel's tone hardened. Then we fight. First step, I am filing additional patents today. Every variation, every improvement, every derivative you have touched in the last year, we lock it all down. A spark of relief flared in me. Do it fast. They are already moving. We hung up and I sat staring at the skyline as the city fully woke. Below, people hurried across streets, horns blared, sirens wailed in the distance. Life moved forward, oblivious. But up here, on the 32nd floor of Heliction, war was brewing in silence. The rest of the day was a blur of whispers and glances. Word had spread that I had clashed with Damien in the boardroom. Some colleagues avoided me, afraid of being tainted by proximity. Others lingered near my desk, offering quiet encouragement when no one was watching. Marcus hovered like a shadow, his concern etched into every glance. At lunch, I sat alone in the cafeteria, my food untouched. Across the room, Damien entered with a group of executives. Their laughter was loud, performative, meant to reach me. He did not look at me, not directly, but every gesture, every smirk was a message. I own this place. You are just passing through. I clenched my fork until my knuckles whitened. Let him laugh. Let him preen, because I had something he would never possess, the truth, and the truth, when wielded properly, could cut sharper than any blade. That evening, I returned to the office long after most had gone home. The building was quiet again, the hum of machines my only companion. I sat at my desk, laptop open, evidence spread across my screens like a map of betrayal. My reflection glared back at me from the dark glass. The fear was there, yes. Fear that they were too powerful, too connected, that they could twist the narrative until I was the villain. But beneath the fear was something stronger: resolve. They thought I was just a brilliant engineer they could control, a pretty face they could dismiss. They had no idea that I had been preparing for this kind of battle my entire life. I typed one final command, sealing the encryption on the backups, and whispered to myself, "You wanted war, Damien. Now you will have it." The following week felt like walking through a storm that had not yet broken. The sky outside the Heliction Tower stayed gray, heavy with clouds, as if the city itself mirrored the tension inside the building. Meetings multiplied, emails doubled, whispers carried down hallways like smoke from a fire no one could ignore. Everyone felt the shift, though few understood it. I kept moving, calm on the surface, but beneath I was a network of calculations and countermeasures. Rachel was filing the new patents. My backups were secure in 3 separate locations. I had built walls around Orion that even Heliction could not breach without tearing themselves apart. Yet the danger was not just in stolen code. The real danger was perception. Damien knew it, and that was where he struck first. On Monday morning, I swiped my badge at the elevator and found it rejected. Red light, denied. For a moment, I thought it was an error. I tried again. Another denial. A security guard appeared, shifting awkwardly. "Sorry, Ms. Luna, there seems to be a glitch with your access." A glitch? I almost laughed. Glitches did not happen to only one person in a 30-story building. This was deliberate, a test, a message. Marcus appeared moments later, storming across the lobby. "What the hell is going on?" The guard shrugged helplessly. "It says her credentials were deactivated." Marcus fixed him with a glare. "Fix it. Now." Within minutes, my badge was restored, but the damage was done. Everyone watching had seen me denied entry into my own workplace. It was theater, and Damien had written the script. By noon, the rumors started. I overheard fragments in the cafeteria, whispers in corridors, that I had sabotaged a system update, that I was difficult, unstable, a liability to the project. None of it true, but repetition made truth malleable. Damien knew the oldest trick in corporate war: assassinate the reputation, and the person collapses long before the facts can catch up. I held my silence. Outwardly, I said nothing. Inwardly, I prepared, because when the moment came, silence would be the sharpest weapon. That evening, I implemented my first countermeasure. I logged into Orion's architecture and pushed an update that looked like routine maintenance, but woven into the lines of code was something more. New authentication layers, invisible to anyone who did not know where to look. Keys that only I could fully activate. In simple terms, I had changed the locks on the house. Heliction could walk through the front door, but every wall, every support beam, every structural secret depended on blueprints only I held. The next morning, the storm hit. The boardroom was crowded again, tension hanging like static in the air. Victor sat stiffly at the head, lawyers flanking him. Damien was already there when I entered, leaning against the table with that same smirk. A stack of papers rested in front of him, and the moment I sat, he slid them toward me. "These are incident reports," he announced loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "Over the past 72 hours, several engineers have reported being locked out of core systems. Project delays are stacking up. Productivity is dropping." And all of this began immediately after Mariana implemented her so-called security protocols. Every pair of eyes turned to me. The weight was crushing, but I forced myself to remain still, expression unreadable. I let him continue. "She has created unnecessary dependencies," Damien pressed on, voice sharp, each word honed to wound. "She has positioned herself as the only one with full control. That is not just dangerous, it is sabotage. She is holding this company hostage." There it was, the twist. Not whispered, not hidden in corners, but spoken aloud before the highest level of Heliction's leadership. He was not trying to steal in silence anymore. He was trying to destroy me openly. I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them lean forward. Then I spoke, my voice steady. "I created those protocols because someone attempted to break into Orion's core architecture. Unauthorized access, recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. I secured the system. That is not sabotage, that is responsibility." A ripple moved through the room. Lawyers glanced at each other, board members shifted uneasily. Damien's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. And yet, he shot back, no one else has seen this so-called evidence. For all we know, these claims are just excuses to justify your own power grab. I opened my laptop, connecting it to the projector with deliberate calm. Screens filled with logs, footage, recordings. Damien's face appeared on the security feed, standing behind Tom Brennan as the junior engineer typed furiously. The room went still. "This," I said quietly, "is what you call an excuse?" The silence was absolute. For a moment, Damien's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. But then he laughed, sharp and hollow. "Out of context," he sneered. "You twist the narrative. I was supervising, nothing more." I closed the laptop without another word. Let him scramble. Let him explain away what everyone had just seen, because sometimes silence speaks louder than defense. Victor finally exhaled. "Enough, we will reconvene later." Meeting adjourned. As the room emptied, Damien lingered. He leaned close enough that only I could hear. "You think this proves anything? All it shows is how desperate you are. The board does not trust you, and soon no one in this industry will either." I met his eyes, my voice barely above a whisper. "You just made your biggest mistake, Damien. You showed me you are willing to fight in the open. Now the entire world will see who you really are." I walked out before he could respond. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. For the first time, I realized something that sent a spark of fire through my chest. Damien believed he was hunting me, but in truth, he had just stepped into my game. And I never lost my own game. The air in the building shifted after that meeting. It was subtle at first, but I felt it in the glances that lingered too long, in the silences that fell when I entered a room. The footage I had revealed rattled the board, but it had not finished Damien. He was too deeply entrenched, too arrogant to accept defeat. By midweek, the rumors spread like wildfire. In the cafeteria, I overheard two analysts whisper that I had doctored the video. In the hallway, a pair of interns exchanged glances and quickly looked away when I passed. By Thursday morning, someone had sent an anonymous message to my team, claiming I had locked them out on purpose to leverage a higher payout. The story was clever in its cruelty. It painted me not as the victim, but as the manipulator. I knew exactly who orchestrated it. Damien was not just fighting me in boardrooms. He was poisoning the ground I stood on. I refused to flinch. If he thought rumors would isolate me, he underestimated the bonds I had with my team. Marcus cornered me at my desk one afternoon, his face tight with anger. "People are saying you sabotaged Orion," he muttered. "And do you believe them?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "Of course not. I was here. I saw what you built. I know what you've done for this company. But others, they don't know you like I do. They're scared." Fear, that was Damien's weapon, and fear spreads faster than truth. That night, I stayed late again. The office was nearly empty, the glow of monitors dimming as screensaver lights danced in the dark. I sat alone, scrolling through documentation, rewriting notes, making sure every contribution was clearly stamped with my name and my timestamps. The walls of Orion would not just be code, they would be testimony. At 2 a.m., I received a message, an untraceable number, 6 words. "You can't win. Sign it now." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady, my lips curling into a thin smile. They thought intimidation would weaken me. They did not understand that threats only sharpen my resolve. The following day, I made my move. I called an emergency meeting with my development team. Dozens of engineers crowded into the glass conference room, their faces tired, curious, some skeptical. I stood at the front with a whiteboard behind me and the weight of war in my chest. "I know you've heard things," I began. "Rumors, stories, lies. I won't waste your time denying them. Instead, I'll show you the truth." I connected my laptop to the screen. Logs, diagrams, timestamps filled the projection. Every dependency of Orion highlighted, every component marked with my patents. Red threads stretched across the architecture, a web of proof. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is Orion. And these red sections are the parts that exist because of me, because of us. Every attempt to copy, to bypass, to claim otherwise will fail. And I want you all to document everything. Every line of code, every process. Timestamp it, back it up, make it undeniable. If they try to cut me out, they cut you out too. Without us, there is no Orion." The room was silent, then Marcus stepped forward. "I'm with you," he said simply. One by one, the others nodded. Engineers who had once been silent found their voices. They understood now that this was not just my fight, it was theirs too. That afternoon, Damien stormed into my office, slamming the door shut so hard the glass rattled. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. I leaned back in my chair calm, making sure the truth survives. "You're sabotaging the launch. I'm protecting it." His face flushed red, his composure cracking. You think this makes you untouchable? You're isolating yourself. The board already thinks you're unstable. Keep this up and you'll be finished. I slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a cease and desist draft Rachel had prepared, the company letterhead glaring back at him like a warning bell. Think, I said softly, that you are running out of moves. He slammed the folder shut, leaning close enough for me to smell his cologne, sharp and expensive. You don't know who you're messing with. I met his eyes, unblinking. Actually, I do. A man who thinks a Harvard degree and a family name can replace talent. A man so desperate to matter that he steals the work of those who do. That's who you are, Damien. For the first time, I saw him falter. Just for a second, his eyes flickered with doubt. He recovered quickly, straightening his tie and sneering, but I had seen it. When he left, slamming the door behind him, Marcus slipped into the office. You realize everyone heard that, right? He said. Good, I replied, sipping my cold coffee. Let them. By Friday, the entire floor knew a battle was being fought. Some avoided me, fearful of being caught in the crossfire. Others gravitated closer, drawn by the quiet fire they saw in my eyes. Damien had unleashed the rumor war, but in doing so, he had also forced people to choose sides, and many chose mine. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan and painted the glass towers with gold, I stood by the window and let the city lights blur before me. War was no longer coming. It was here, and I was ready. The weekend passed with a strange kind of quiet. The city outside moved as if nothing had changed, but inside Heliction, tensions simmered under polished floors and mirrored walls. I spent Saturday and Sunday in my small apartment near Midtown, laptop open, coffee cold at my side, preparing for the week ahead. Every document, every piece of evidence I had collected was reviewed, cataloged, encrypted, and stored in triplicate. Rachel and I spent hours on the phone, plotting our next moves. We cannot rely solely on the Pats, she said, voice low but determined. We need contracts, internal memos, email trails, anything that can prove intent. Damien is smart, Mariana, but he is not invisible. Every move he makes leaves traces. I nodded, though she could not see me. I've already pulled logs from the server, cross-referenced timestamps, and created a backup in 3 secure locations. I know exactly what has been accessed and by whom. There is no ambiguity. The proof is airtight. Good, she replied. Now you need to be strategic. You cannot storm into the boardroom again without a plan. They have already labeled you unstable. Use the rules, make them act legally or publicly, expose them slowly. I leaned back, thinking Damien's strategy was chaos. Rumors, whispers, manipulation. He thrived in the shadows where he could twist perception. My weapon was clarity and control. Information, organized and undeniable, was mine to wield. Monday arrived with sharp sunlight slicing through my office blinds. I entered the building with calm steps, badge scanning cleanly as always. The morning was routine on the surface. Engineers tapped keyboards, servers hummed steadily, coffee machines hissed in the corners. Yet I felt the undercurrent, the invisible currents of anticipation. Rachel called me first thing. I have filed 3 additional patents over the weekend. Variations of Orion, algorithmic improvements, redundancy protocols. Damien will not see these coming. If they attempt to launch without you, every line he touches will infringe upon something new. We are locking the system legally. I exhaled. Perfect. That is what we need. By noon, I called a private meeting with the internal legal team. I laid out everything. Timestamps, server logs, the security footage, the transfer agreement, emails that hinted at Damien's interference. I walked them through the exact sequence of events. If Heliction moves forward without properly licensing my work, it is patent infringement, plain and simple. If Damien uses my code without authorization, he and the company are legally liable for millions. And we will prove malicious intent. My voice was calm but unyielding, each word deliberate like placing chess pieces on a board. The lead counsel, a seasoned woman named Alina, nodded slowly. This is compelling. The combination of technical evidence and clear ownership makes it difficult for the company to argue otherwise. But you must be careful. Damien will try to spin this. He will use internal politics, alliances, and rumor to obscure the truth. I understand, I said. Then we leave no room for doubt. Every action, every move will be documented. The rest of the day was spent coordinating with Marcus and the senior engineers. We created a chain of custody for all critical files. Each backup had timestamps, hash verification, and audit trails. Every log entry was cross-checked. If Heliction attempted any move to discredit me, the evidence would speak louder than whispers. By evening, the office was quiet again, lights dimmed but screens still glowing. I reviewed the strategy one last time. Damien had escalated openly, but he had underestimated one thing. I was not just reacting, I was anticipating. I had prepared for every contingency, every possible route he could take to discredit or displace me. I called Rachel before leaving. Tomorrow we move. The board needs to be shown that any unauthorized use of Orion's architecture exposes them to liability. If Damien thinks he can bluff his way, he is in for a rude awakening. Good. I will draft the motion and the cease and desist notices. By the end of the day, the legal foundation will be unshakable. Every path he might use will be blocked. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The city lights glimmered on wet asphalt as a drizzle began. Each drop traced a line down the glass, like the tick of a metronome counting down the moves before the storm. Tuesday morning, the plan began to unfold. I requested a meeting with the board, citing security concerns. Damien sat across from me, expression confident, unaware that I held all the cards. Victor did not look pleased. I presented a detailed report, security logs, timestamps, server footage, copies of patents, and annotations of every unauthorized access attempt. Each piece was concise but irrefutable. Damien's smug smile wavered as the room absorbed the data. Board members whispered, some frowning, others leaning in to see more clearly. "This is what I discovered," I said. Unauthorized access to Orion's core architecture. Evidence clearly points to interference with system integrity. Every attempt to bypass protocols, manipulate code, or misrepresent my work is documented. Legal counsel is aware, and further steps have been taken to protect both the company and myself. A murmur ran through the boardroom. Damien cleared his throat, eyes narrowing. "This is circumstantial. You are interpreting logs to suit your narrative." I leaned forward. "No interpretation required. The logs, the timestamps, the footage, and the chain of custody all speak for themselves. Attempting to claim otherwise is both factually incorrect and legally dangerous." Victor's jaw tightened. He was caught between a son's pride and the undeniable evidence before him. Damien's eyes flickered briefly toward him, seeking support, but Victor remained silent. I concluded, voice steady, "I am not here to play politics. I am here to protect Orion and the integrity of its architecture. Any move to launch, replicate, or misrepresent the system without proper authorization exposes the company to immediate legal consequences." The boardroom was quiet, but beneath the silence I felt a subtle shift. The evidence had done its work. Rumors could not override facts. Damien's bluff was cracking. When the meeting adjourned, I returned to my office, pulse still racing. Marcus met me with a small smile. "You did it." "They saw it all?" "Not all of it," I said. "Just enough. The real moves are still ahead. Damien will try again, but now every path he can take has been foreseen." I opened my laptop again, reviewing the new patents, logs, and communications. Every entry a safeguard, every line of code a shield. The pieces were falling into place. I was ready for the next wave. As night fell over Manhattan, I stood by the window again, rain streaking the glass. For the first time, I felt the weight of control. Not arrogance, not pride, but clarity. Damien could threaten, lie, manipulate, and whisper. But the truth, fully documented and strategically placed, was mine to wield. And when the time came, it would be more powerful than anything he could imagine. The day began with an unusual stillness. The kind of stillness that precedes a storm so intense you can almost hear the wind building in the distance. I walked into the office, badge scanning clean, laptop in hand. The corridors of Heliction were quiet for once, the usual chatter muted, the hum of printers and copiers faint, as if everyone knew something was coming but did not yet know what. I made my way to Marcus's desk. He looked up, eyes sharp. "Morning, the board is already reviewing your submissions from yesterday. There's chatter. Damien is unsettled." I nodded without looking up. "Good, let him feel it. Fear sharpens the mind, or dulls it depending on who wields it. He is about to find out which side of that line he stands on." Marcus smirked faintly. "You are enjoying this too much." "Not enjoying, preparing, there is a difference," I said. By mid-morning, Rachel's call came through. "The patents are in place, Mariana. Additional filings, timestamps, encryption keys, everything. Even if they try to spin the narrative or create copies, legally, Heliction cannot touch Orion without your explicit authorization." I smiled faintly. "Perfect. Now it's time to let them overreach and see how far they will go." The first test came sooner than expected. Damien orchestrated a series of internal emails that implied I had withheld critical updates from the development team. Some of the junior engineers were confused, hesitant to proceed without my guidance. Damien sent a memo to the board, stating that I was causing delays that threatened the Orion launch timeline. I read the memo carefully, then drafted my response. Calm, factual, precise. Each assertion was supported with screenshots, timestamps, email chains, and server logs. There was no room for misinterpretation, no ambiguity for him to exploit. I delivered it directly to the legal department and CC'd the board. Within minutes, the tone of communication shifted. Damien's memo was met with pointed questions, requests for clarification, and cautious skepticism. By lunchtime, I convened a small meeting with my senior engineers. I know there's been confusion, but here is the reality, I said. All updates were deployed according to schedule. Every change is documented. If anyone has doubts, check the logs. You all have access. Nothing has been hidden. The narrative being pushed is false, and it will be proven false. Heads nodded. Confidence returned. The fear that Damien's whispers had planted began to dissipate. That afternoon, I called Rachel again. They are pushing back. Damien is leveraging internal politics, alliances, and perception. He will attempt to discredit me in front of the board if we are not careful. I anticipated as much, Rachel replied. We will escalate carefully. Cease and desist notices for any unauthorized use of Orion have been drafted. Internal memos will clarify the legal consequences. We will force the company to act according to law, not gossip. I felt a flicker of satisfaction. This was exactly the game I had prepared for. Damien's strength was manipulation, mine was precision. The pieces were in place. That evening, as I reviewed the documentation one last time, Marcus appeared at my office doorway. You know he will try something tonight. Damien does not give up easily. I know, I said, leaning back in my chair. Let him try, I am ready. And try he did. Around 9 p.m., an email blast went out to the company, carefully worded but suggestive. Mariana Luna has restricted access to certain systems, causing delays and confusion in the Orion project. The message implied negligence, even malice. I opened my encrypted logs and screenshots, then sent a company-wide memo in response. Calm, professional, indisputable. Each point countered the insinuation, supported by hard evidence. I attached timestamps, server logs, emails, and screenshots. I did not write a single accusatory word. Facts spoke louder than accusation. By midnight, the company chatter had shifted. The rumor of my negligence had been neutralized. Damien's attempt to manipulate perception had failed. I sat back, sipping cold coffee, the glow of the monitors illuminating the exhaustion and determination in my eyes. The next moves will be more desperate, I whispered to myself, and I will be ready. The following morning, I convened a meeting with the legal team, Marcus, and the senior engineers. We are entering a phase where every action is scrutinized, I said. Every line of code, every email, every system log. Nothing goes undocumented. Damien will push, he will attempt to manipulate, but we will be precise. Any deviation from legality, any unauthorized access, and the consequences will be immediate. The legal team nodded. Rachel added, we have structured the documentation so that any attempt to override, alter, or copy Orion will be met with immediate action. Heliction will have no choice but to follow the law. I felt the weight of control settle over me. It was not arrogance. It was clarity. Damien could threaten, manipulate, and spin narratives, but the truth, fully documented and strategically placed, was now my weapon. Over the next 2 days, I monitored every internal communication, every code commit, every access attempt. Damien escalated attempts to bypass restrictions, each move recorded and logged with precise evidence. The engineers I trusted were briefed on verification protocols, chain of custody procedures, and the importance of documentation. Every file I touched, every line of code I committed, every record I stored was a safeguard. By Friday evening, the pressure had shifted. Damien's maneuvers, once cloaked in secrecy and whispers, were now transparent. His every attempt to manipulate internal perception or circumvent legal restrictions had been logged, documented, and countered. I closed my laptop, finally allowing myself a moment to breathe. Outside the window, the Manhattan skyline glittered as the rain had stopped, leaving streets gleaming like mirrors. For the first time in the week, I felt a flicker of calm. The board could no longer ignore the evidence. Damien's whispers and insinuations had no power over documented truth. I leaned back, letting the rhythm of the city settle in my mind. This was the calm before the storm. Damien would make his next move, and it would be desperate, but I had anticipated it. Every path he could take, every claim he could make, every action he might try had already been foreseen, documented, and countered. This was more than defense. This was preparation for offense. And when the time came, he would find himself exposed, cornered by the very rules he thought he could manipulate. I exhaled slowly, watching the lights flicker across the office floor. Orion was safe. For now. But the war was only beginning. The morning air in Manhattan was crisp, almost impossibly clear for early October, but inside Heliction the temperature felt heavier, charged with tension. The day that had been scheduled for the Orion demonstration had arrived, and with it, the culmination of weeks of maneuvering, whispers, and calculated chess moves. The office floor was unusually silent. Engineers clustered around their monitors, checking last-minute data streams, double-checking security protocols, their expressions tight with anxiety. I walked to the server room with Marcus at my side. Every light, every hum of the machines told a story of preparation and vigilance. Yet the moment I logged in to check the central system, my stomach dropped. The dashboard was red with error messages. Core functions were offline. Algorithms that had been stable for months were locked or inactive. Orion was not functioning. "Check the logs," I said, voice tight. Marcus typed rapidly, eyes scanning the screen. "It looks like someone attempted to override the authentication protocols, but they failed. The system is locked, partially corrupted, but the timestamps indicate." Someone was in the system at 2:47 a.m., my chest tightened. Damien had been at the office late the night before, pushing internal manipulation. He had escalated from rumor and politics to direct interference. I already knew what he was trying to do: destabilize Orion and blame me. I called an immediate emergency meeting. Victor, Damien, the board, and my legal counsel were present within the hour. The room buzzed with tension, a mix of anticipation and panic. Damien stepped forward, voice icy and controlled. "It appears there has been a critical failure in the Orion system. Someone must have executed an unauthorized shutdown. Mariana, can you explain?" All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath. Calm, measured. There was no shutdown on my part. The system's security logs show attempted unauthorized access overnight. The timestamps, server logs, and authentication records all indicate that an external attempt was made to override protocols. "I can provide the evidence immediately." Damien's smirk faltered for the first time. "External, or perhaps internal?" I connected my laptop to the conference room projector. The feed displayed logs, error reports, timestamps, and screen captures. I highlighted entries showing multiple failed login attempts from a corporate account that should have had no access. Then I brought up the security camera footage from the East Wing, time-stamped precisely. Damien's face appeared, standing behind a junior engineer as the engineer typed rapidly at the terminal. Gasps rippled through the room. Board members leaned forward, whispers running through them. Damien's confident posture wavered. I continued, voice steady. "This evidence proves intent, access, and sequence. The attempt to override the system was deliberate and unauthorized. I did not touch the kill switch. My role has always been to secure Orion, to prevent exactly this type of breach. Any claim otherwise is false." Victor's jaw tightened. He exchanged a glance with the legal counsel. Damien's hands curled into fists, his lips pressed tightly. The room was a battlefield of subtle expressions and silent calculations. "You are trying to manipulate perception," Damien hissed. "The logs can be interpreted. You can fabricate timestamps. This does not prove your innocence." I smiled faintly, tapping the screen. "You underestimate the audit trail, Damien. Every action, every attempted login, every command is timestamped, hashed, and cross-verified across multiple servers. Fabrication is impossible. You are exposed." A tense silence followed. Then Alina, our lead counsel, spoke. "Mr. Cross, continued interference with the Orion system without authorization constitutes corporate and legal liability. Evidence has been reviewed, verified, and documented. Attempts to misrepresent these facts will have consequences." Damien's face twisted in anger. "You think this board will side with you?" Victor finally spoke, voice low but carrying authority. "Damien, I am reviewing the evidence. Your actions may have put the company at risk. We will consider further steps. This is no longer a discussion of perception or rumor. Facts are on the table." For the first time, Damien looked genuinely unsettled. He had thought his power, his whispers, his threats, and his manipulation would control the narrative. Instead, he had exposed himself. I leaned back, letting the weight of control settle. "This is not about me, Victor. It is about Orion. You cannot launch a system that is manipulated, unstable, or illegally accessed. I have acted to protect the project. Damien has acted to endanger it." The boardroom was silent, the gravity of the moment sinking in. Damien tried to speak, to assert some defense, but no words formed. Every move, every action had been anticipated. Every avenue of attack had been documented. He had trapped himself. Victor exhaled slowly. Given this evidence, Mr. Cross, the company will take immediate steps to prevent further unauthorized access. Your role in this project is under review. Mariana, your protocols will remain active. All access is to be controlled as per your directives until further notice. I felt a mixture of relief and vindication. The storm had hit, but the foundation I had laid held firm. Damien's attempt to manipulate, to destabilize, to falsely accuse me had collapsed under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Marcus reached over, touching my shoulder lightly. "You did it," he said softly. I shook my head. "We did it. This is just the beginning. Damien will regroup, but now he knows. He cannot act in the shadows. He cannot hide behind whispers and fear. Every move he makes will be documented, countered, and exposed." The rest of the day passed with a strange energy. Damien retreated to his office, muttering into the phone. The engineers were cautious but reassured. Board members approached me, quietly asking questions, acknowledging the clarity and precision of my evidence. I remained professional, calm, but inside, a quiet satisfaction bloomed. The plot twist had landed. The predator had been revealed. By evening, I stood by the window of the conference room, watching the city lights reflect off wet streets. Rain had fallen, cleaning the windows, leaving the streets gleaming like polished obsidian. I thought about Damien, cornered, exposed, and for the first time truly vulnerable. I allowed myself a small smile. "This is how it begins," I whispered. "And now the real game starts." The aftermath of the morning's revelations left the boardroom in a state of tense silence. Damien sat rigid, jaw clenched, eyes darting toward Victor for some reassurance that would not come. The veneer of control he had worn for months had cracked. Every whisper he had spun, every manipulation he had attempted, lay exposed in the logs, the footage, and the timestamps meticulously gathered over the past weeks. I leaned against the conference table, calm, observing him. He had assumed power could shield him, that his name and presence would bend the facts in his favor. But evidence, compiled methodically and with precision, had a weight that neither arrogance nor fear could counter. Victor broke the silence. "Given the unauthorized access and the potential legal ramifications, Mr. Cross, we must take immediate action to protect the company and the Orion project. I am recommending suspension of system privileges until further review." Damien's hands clenched into fists under the table. "Suspension? On what grounds? This is preposterous. She is overreacting. I was only." "You were violating security protocols and interfering with system access," I interrupted, voice calm but firm. "Your attempt to manipulate the project was deliberate. The evidence is clear. The chain of events, the timestamps, and video recordings confirm it. You are accountable." The room was silent again. Damien opened his mouth to protest, but I continued. "Furthermore, the system cannot be fully stabilized unless the individual who built it maintains control over core access. Without me, Orion is vulnerable. Launching under compromised conditions would be catastrophic for the company, for investors, and for users." Victor's gaze lingered on me. "And your terms?" I inhaled slowly. Every detail had been considered. This was the moment to assert not just control, but security, justice, and the value of what I had built. "I will provide full operational oversight and legal clearance for Orion, but under conditions. Damien Cross must be permanently removed from any operational or executive involvement in Orion. Additionally, Heliction must secure the exclusive rights to the patents I have developed at a fair valuation. I propose $600 million for the full rights and protections of the project." A collective murmur spread through the board members. Damien's face drained of color, his confident posture collapsing under the weight of the room's attention. Victor cleared his throat. $600 million? "Yes," I said firmly. "This reflects the true value of Orion's intellectual property, the years of development, the market potential, and the legal risk mitigation I am providing. Any attempt to circumvent this arrangement will be met with immediate legal action." Damien's lips curled into a bitter, forced smile. "You think the board will agree to that? Do you truly believe?" "I do," I said. "Because it is the only legally sound, ethical, and operationally responsible course of action. You exposed your attempts to manipulate and compromise the project. You forfeited the right to remain involved." Victor leaned back, considering the proposal. His hands tapped the table. "We will need to negotiate terms, but given the evidence and the urgency of stabilizing Orion, your proposal will be seriously considered. This is an extraordinary situation." I nodded. I expect rapid resolution. Orion cannot wait. The integrity of the system and the safety of the project are at stake. The meeting adjourned, but the atmosphere had shifted permanently. Damien left without another word, slamming the door behind him. There was no longer any pretense, no illusion of power. The plot had turned. The predator was cornered. Later that afternoon, legal drafts were exchanged. Rachel guided the process with precision, ensuring that all documentation was airtight. Contracts were drawn, clauses reviewed, and the terms of exclusive rights clearly established. Damien attempted subtle interventions, sending emails, appealing to board members, trying to sow doubt. Every attempt was anticipated, countered, and documented. By Friday, the agreements were finalized. Damien was removed from any operational oversight of Orion, barred from executive decision-making related to the project, and his access permanently revoked. The company agreed to secure the intellectual property exclusively under Mariana Luna's oversight and valuation terms. $600 million. A figure representing not just money, but the acknowledgement of her contributions, foresight, and unassailable skill. Standing by the window after the final signatures were in place, I allowed myself a brief moment of satisfaction. The city stretched below, streets gleaming under the late afternoon sun, a tapestry of light and motion. I had turned the tide, not through aggression, but through meticulous preparation, evidence, and strategy. Damien had been a formidable opponent, but he had underestimated the power of truth combined with foresight. Marcus appeared beside me, watching the skyline. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," I corrected, knowing the efforts of the team and the legal strategy had been as crucial as my own actions. Orion is secure. Damien is removed. The project can proceed without risk. And the company has recognized its true value. The moment was not for celebration. It was for reflection. For understanding that power is not only about force, intimidation, or manipulation. It is about preparation, evidence, and the willingness to act decisively when the moment arrives. As evening fell, lights from the city reflected in the glass. I whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning. The storm has been weathered, but the path forward is mine to define." The game is won, but the future is still to be claimed. The plot twist had delivered its full impact. Damien, once confident and untouchable, was defeated not by strength or rage, but by clarity, preparation, and relentless precision. Orion was safe, and the victory had been achieved at the highest stakes imaginable. The morning after the boardroom victory felt strangely light. The city below Manhattan shimmered as dawn broke over skyscrapers, the streets alive with the usual tide of yellow cabs, delivery vans, and hurried commuters. From 32 floors up, the world looked organized, almost predictable. And yet nothing felt predictable anymore. Not for me. Not since the events of the last several weeks had shifted everything. I entered the Heliction office with calm steps, badge scanning smoothly, laptop under my arm. The team was already at work, monitors glowing softly, fingers flying across keyboards, eyes intent. Their energy was steady, focused, but I could feel the unspoken tension, the lingering awareness of what had just occurred. Damien's shadow had been removed from the equation, but the echoes of his actions remained. Whispers, rumors, and fractured trust had left scars. Victor greeted me formally at the door. "Mariana, congratulations on securing Orion's stability. Your leadership has been exemplary." I nodded, acknowledging the words but not the sentiment. "Thank you, Victor. The team has done all the work. I simply ensured the integrity of the project." He smiled thinly. "The board has decided to offer you a permanent executive position, complete authority over Orion, and additional stock options. Essentially, you will be the new Chief Innovation Officer. You will have full control over the system and all associated projects." I paused. I had anticipated this. It was logical, expected even. The company needed me, the board needed reassurance, and Damien's departure had created a vacuum. Yet in that moment, a thought crystallized clearly in my mind. Authority within Heliction was not freedom. Control over Orion meant continuing to fight internal politics, navigating corporate webs, and managing personalities that had proven themselves dangerous. I took a slow breath. "Victor, I appreciate the offer, truly, but I cannot accept." He blinked, surprised. "Cannot, Mariana, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. You would have unparalleled power, resources, and support to advance Orion and related projects." "I have all I need to advance Orion," I said, "but my life is not just about maintaining control over someone else's empire. I've built the system, I've protected it, and now it's time for me to define the terms of my own path." Victor hesitated. He was calculating, weighing the consequences of my refusal. You do understand that leaving now would mean relinquishing operational control. The company could appoint someone else. You would lose your authority and influence immediately. I understand, I replied, and I am willing to let go. I am not leaving because I am weak. I am leaving because I am strong enough to build my own foundation, free from compromise and manipulation. The words felt right on my tongue. I had spent countless hours, sleepless nights, coding, planning, and securing Orion. I had been cornered, threatened, undermined, and yet I had emerged victorious. Now, the final act was not to remain, but to step into my own story. That afternoon, I met with Marcus and a few senior engineers who had been with me since the early days of Orion. We sat in a quiet conference room, sunlight spilling across the table. "I'm leaving Helixion," I said. "I've secured Orion, ensured Damien is removed, and protected the integrity of the project. I'm starting something new, a company of our own where we set the rules and decide our path." Marcus leaned back, expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. "That's huge, but are you sure? You fought so hard here, you could have ruled this place." "I could have," I said softly, "but I don't want to rule a system built by someone else's empire. I want to build my own from the ground up. We have the talent, the knowledge, and the vision. It's time to take control in a place where we answer only to ourselves." Over the next several days, the preparations began. I reached out to legal counsel to separate my PATs from Helixion under the agreed terms. We organized the technical infrastructure, setting up secure servers for our new venture. Marcus coordinated with the engineers, ensuring that their knowledge and experience could transfer smoothly, without violating Helixion's operational boundaries or non-compete clauses. Every step was meticulous, every detail considered. We were not simply leaving a company, we were building a foundation that would make Helixion irrelevant if they tried to compete. The night before my last day, I stood in the Orion division one final time. The lights hummed softly, casting reflections on the glass walls. Screens displayed the algorithms and networks I had built, the heart of a system that had nearly been taken from me. I walked slowly through the floor, each step heavy with memory. I could recall nights of coding until 3 in the morning, days arguing with investors, the moment I discovered Damien's first attempt at infiltration, the tense silence of boardrooms where every word could mean victory or defeat. I paused at my workstation. Fingers hovering over the keyboard, I allowed myself a small smile. "You will be safe," I whispered, "but I am moving forward, and I will not stop here." The following morning, I left Helixion. The city was already awake, streets alive with energy and motion. I held a small briefcase in one hand, my laptop under the other arm, and stepped into a cab. Manhattan blurred past the windows as I felt a sense of liberation I had never experienced. Victory had been achieved, but this was freedom. Not the freedom of power within someone else's walls, but the freedom to define, create, and control my own destiny. By midday, the team and I convened in a small co-working space we had secured for the startup. We had minimal resources, but our focus was absolute. We outlined the architecture, assigned roles, and set goals. Orion's core ideas were secure, and the new company would advance them under our own terms. As the sun set, casting golden light over the streets, I looked at the faces of the team, dedicated, talented, and ready. We had been tested, forged in the fires of corporate warfare, and now stood on the threshold of creation. I allowed myself one deep breath, the kind that carries weight, relief, and anticipation all at once. "This is the beginning," I said. "Not just of a company, but of everything we can create when we answer only to ourselves." The city stretched endlessly below us, alive, vibrant, oblivious to the battles fought in its towers. But for me, everything had changed. Damien had been defeated. Orion was secure, and the path forward was ours to build. I smiled quietly, feeling the first true freedom I had known in years. Victory had been achieved not just through strength, but through foresight, precision, and unwavering resolve. And now the real journey began. The first days in our new space felt surreal. The room was small, its walls plain, but the energy within it was electric. The hum of laptops, the click of keyboards, the low murmur of engineers collaborating, it was alive. I walked among them, absorbing the rhythm, feeling a sense of control I had never experienced before. Here, no one questioned my authority, no whispers threatened my reputation. Every decision rested on merit, skill, and vision. We set up the core infrastructure first, transferring what could legally be used from Helixion, ensuring compliance while preserving the innovations I had created. Firewalls were fortified, server access strictly controlled, and backups encrypted and stored offsite. Every line of code, every neural architecture blueprint was accounted for. We were starting lean, but the foundation was solid. Marcus stood beside me, eyes scanning the newly set-up system. "This is real," he said softly. "No corporate politics, no backstabbing, just us, our vision, and Orion." "Yes," I said, "and we will make it succeed on our terms." Our first week was a whirlwind. We formalized the company, set up legal structures, opened accounts, and reached out to our first clients. The initial contacts were cautious, naturally. Helixion was a name they recognized, a brand with reach and influence. But when they understood that Orion's core architecture could be deployed under our direct oversight, with assurance of stability and integrity, interest surged. By the end of the second week, we had signed contracts with several mid-sized technology firms, all eager to integrate our systems into their AI frameworks. We were still small, still fragile, but our reputation as the team behind Orion gave us credibility that no marketing could replicate. The board at Helixion was aware, of course. Damien had tried to warn investors, to claim that I was overreaching, that the system could not function outside of Helixion's infrastructure. But evidence, precision, and foresight once again worked in my favor. Orion was stable. Our protocols were secure, and we had no intention of compromising the system or violating any agreements. One evening, after a long day of coding and strategy planning, I leaned against the window of our new office. The city spread beneath me, a maze of lights and movement, endless possibilities unfolding in every direction. I allowed myself a small smile. We had done more than escape the shadows of Helixion. We had claimed autonomy. Marcus joined me, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one without a word. I accepted it, sipping slowly. "They are scared," he said finally. "Helixion, Damien, everyone, they see what we've built and they don't like it." "Let them be scared," I replied. "It only means we are doing something right." Over the next month, we focused on growth. We brought in additional engineers, carefully selected for skill, loyalty, and vision alignment. Each person understood the stakes. This was not just a company, it was a statement. We trained together, debugged together, and brainstormed relentlessly. Every feature, every update, every deployment was executed with meticulous care. News began to spread beyond our small office. A few industry insiders noticed Orion's functionality in live environments. Analysts began asking questions about the team behind the system. Damien's name faded from the narrative entirely. His influence eroded as the integrity of the project became evident. Helixion could not spin the story, could not reclaim control, because the truth was self-evident and publicly verifiable. I held meetings with investors, presenting roadmaps and projections. Our lean startup model impressed them: high efficiency, minimal bureaucracy, direct accountability. I emphasized our dedication to integrity and the security of Orion. Every question was answered with evidence, every doubt countered with data. Within 6 weeks, we had onboarded our first major client. A global technology firm, previously partnered with Helixion, signed a contract that exceeded initial projections. Their engineers worked directly with our team, impressed by the efficiency, the clarity, and the integrity we had built into every process. The feeling was intoxicating. Not because of money, though it was substantial, but because this was the first tangible affirmation of the choice I had made. I had left the comfort and prestige of Helixion, rejected authority within someone else's empire, and now was seeing the fruit of autonomy. Every evening, I would stand by the office window, looking down at the city. I could almost see the boardroom at Helixion, Damien seething at his failures, Victor realizing the miscalculation of underestimating me. I did not gloat. I simply observed, letting the truth settle where it belonged. Orion thrived under my guidance, and Damien had no influence left. By the end of the second month, we had secured multiple enterprise clients, expanding our team further and establishing a workflow that combined innovation with operational security. The systems were robust, the code elegant, and the team cohesive. Every challenge, from integration issues to scaling problems, was met with the same disciplined focus we had used to defend Orion at Helixion. One evening, Marcus brought a folder of recent client feedback and industry commentary. "Look at this," he said, spreading the papers on the table. "Analysts are starting to take notice. Orion is being credited to your team now, not Helixion." I read through the notes. Praise for the integrity of our systems, acknowledgement of the innovation, recognition of the leadership and vision behind the project. Damien's attempts to smear us had failed spectacularly. His name was fading in relevance. I exhaled, feeling the weight of weeks of tension finally light. This is what it feels like, I said softly. To create without fear, to lead without manipulation, to innovate on our own terms. Marcus smiled, eyes glinting. And this is just the beginning. I nodded. The startup was small, yes, but the foundation was secure. Orion was protected, our patents were enforced, and the team was unified. The next steps would involve scaling, outreach, and further development. But the critical first victory had been achieved. We were independent, unshackled, and ready. As night fell, the city below sparkled with possibility. I looked out at the endless stretch of lights and reflected on the journey, from boardroom confrontations and plot twists to legal battles and strategic maneuvers, to finally stepping into a space of autonomy and creation. Every choice had led here. Every calculated risk had been worth it. I whispered to myself, almost inaudibly, "This is what freedom looks like, and from here, everything we build will belong to us." The storm of Heliction was behind me. Damien was a ghost in the past. The future lay ahead, limitless, unclaimed, and entirely ours to define. The first morning in our new headquarters felt like the world itself had shifted. Sunlight spilled across the glass windows of the loft space we had secured, reflecting off the polished tables and screens that hummed softly with life. The engineers were already at work, their faces illuminated by the glow of monitors, hands flying across keyboards, minds entirely focused on creation. The energy in the room was tangible, electric, a hum of innovation and determination that reminded me why I had chosen this path. I walked among them, observing quietly. Each person moved with purpose, a rhythm established through long days and nights, countless lines of code, and shared victories. We had built more than a company. We had built trust, discipline, and a foundation strong enough to weather storms far greater than anything Heliction had thrown at us. Marcus caught my eye from across the room. "It's incredible," he said softly. "Look at them. Look at what we've built." "Yes," I replied. "And this is only the beginning. What we create from here will define us, not anyone else." The previous months replayed in my mind like a montage of challenges and triumphs. The boardroom confrontations, Damien's manipulations, the midnight theft, the legal maneuvers, the tense meetings, the careful documentation of every line of code. Each moment had brought lessons, sharpened instincts, and strengthened resolve. And now, every effort culminated in this space, alive with possibility. I made my way to the main workstation, sitting down beside the monitors that displayed live analytics from our initial client integrations. The data flowed smoothly, the algorithms performing flawlessly. Orion, in our hands, was alive and robust, no longer a system constrained by corporate politics or stolen credit. "Any word from Heliction?" Marcus asked, leaning against the table. "None that matters," I said. "The board knows Damien is no longer relevant. Orion is untouchable. Our patents, our systems, our credibility all intact. They can no longer influence the narrative or interfere with our operations." Outside, the city stretched endlessly, its pulse unceasing. Below, traffic flowed like neural networks in motion, lights blinking in patterns that mirrored the algorithms humming in our servers. I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. Every choice, every calculated step had led here. From the day I was threatened in the boardroom to this morning, the path had been forged through clarity, foresight, and relentless execution. Emails began to arrive from industry partners, expressing interest in collaboration, integration, and investment. Each message was a testament to the reputation we had built, not just the code, but the integrity behind it. Damien's whispers, his smear campaigns, and attempts to manipulate perception had failed spectacularly. I stood by the window, sipping coffee, watching the streets glow with sunlight. Marcus joined me silently. "They are noticing," he said. "Word is spreading fast. Heliction is trying to spin it, but the truth is obvious." I nodded. "Let them try. Reputation built on truth and skill cannot be undermined by fear or lies." The next few weeks moved like clockwork. We refined workflows, optimized codebases, and scaled our systems for new clients. Our initial contracts had expanded, and new opportunities emerged almost daily. Engineers I had handpicked worked tirelessly, motivated by vision and clarity rather than hierarchy or fear. Late one afternoon, as I reviewed deployment metrics, I received a video call from a potential major investor. They had heard about Orion's success under independent oversight and wanted assurance that our team's integrity would continue as we scaled. I presented, calmly and confidently, the entire infrastructure, security protocols, and development roadmap. By the end of the call, the investor expressed full confidence, promising a multi-million-dollar partnership. I leaned back in my chair, a small smile curling on my lips. The validation was satisfying, but it was not the point. The point was autonomy, the power to create without compromise, the freedom to define success on our own terms. That evening, I gathered the team for a brief meeting. "We've come a long way in a short time," I began. "Orion is stable, our clients are impressed, and we are only starting. But remember, every achievement so far was possible because each of you believed in integrity, in accuracy, and in doing the right thing. Damien is gone. Heliction no longer controls the narrative. The only limit now is what we are willing to create ourselves." The room was quiet, attentive, but I could feel the excitement building. Each person understood the gravity of what we had accomplished and the possibilities ahead. Weeks turned into months. Our small office transformed into a hub of innovation. New engineers joined, clients expanded, and Orion's influence in the market grew. Damien's name faded entirely from the conversation. Heliction remained a shadow of what it had tried to control, but we had surpassed them, not through aggression but through clarity, foresight, and excellence. One evening, I stood by the window once more, city lights reflecting off the glass, a panorama of endless possibility. I thought back to the storm we had survived, the boardroom confrontations, the plot twists, the midnight discoveries, and the meticulous legal maneuvers. Every obstacle had been anticipated, every risk managed, every move calculated. I whispered to myself, "This is what it looks like to be free, to build, to create, to lead on your own terms." Marcus appeared silently beside me. "Do you ever think about what Damien is doing now?" he asked. "No," I replied. "He's irrelevant. The past does not define us. The present and the future do, and we are defining ours." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of triumph and the exhilaration of autonomy. Orion thrived under our hands. Our startup was no longer fledgling. It was a force poised to make an impact. And I was at the center, not because of fear or threat, but because of vision, courage, and unyielding resolve. The city below continued its endless rhythm. But up here in our office, we had built something enduring, something untouchable. Damien's shadow was gone, and no one could ever threaten the integrity of our creation again. I smiled quietly, watching the lights flicker on the streets and the reflections in the glass. Victory had been achieved, freedom secured, and the path forward was ours to shape. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning of everything we could create. The future was ours. Morning arrived crisp and bright, filtering through the large windows of our office space. The city below pulsed with life, unaware of the battles fought in boardrooms, the legal maneuvers, the twists and turns that had brought Orion to this moment of independence. I stood quietly, coffee in hand, watching the streets gleam under the autumn sun. Each reflection on the glass was like a reminder of what had been earned through strategy, resilience, and unwavering determination. The team was already at their stations, hands flying across keyboards, eyes locked on screens, immersed in coding, analysis, and testing. Their energy was tangible, a collective pulse of focus and creativity that reminded me why I had chosen to leave Heliction in the first place. Here, the work was pure, untainted by politics, manipulation, or fear. Marcus approached, carrying a stack of documents and his usual quiet confidence. "Our first international client wants a meeting next week," he said, placing the papers on the table. "They've seen Orion's results and are eager to integrate it into their infrastructure." I nodded, a calm smile tugging at my lips. "Excellent. Prepare the presentation. Make sure all team leads are ready. We will show them not just the system, but the vision behind it." Over the next few hours, we conducted briefings, reviewed deployment schedules, and finalized security protocols. Every action was precise, every detail accounted for. It was remarkable to see a team operate not under fear, but under trust, competence, and shared purpose. The contrast to the Heliction environment was stark, yet invigorating. By midday, the first client call began. Screens displayed live architecture diagrams, real-time data, and dashboards that demonstrated Orion's stability, efficiency, and scalability. The client representatives were visibly impressed, their questions answered with clarity, evidence, and confidence. Every concern, every technical query, every potential risk had been anticipated and addressed. When the call concluded successfully, applause erupted across our office floor. The energy shifted from tension to triumph, a collective acknowledgement of the power of preparation, integrity, and expertise. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "This is it," he said. "They know who we are now and they respect it." I allowed myself a moment to reflect. Months ago, I had been cornered in a boardroom, threatened and undermined. Damien had tried to erase my influence, Heliction had attempted to control the narrative, and the odds had seemed insurmountable. And yet, here we were. Orion thrived, the team was cohesive, and the market now recognized our competence and credibility. That afternoon, I took a walk along the terrace, the city stretching endlessly beneath me. The wind was crisp, carrying the sense of autumn, fallen leaves, wet asphalt, distant cafes preparing for the evening rush. I allowed myself a private acknowledgement of the journey. Every decision, every late night, every calculated risk had led to this moment. Damien was irrelevant, his influence erased by strategy, evidence, and execution. Marcus joined me silently. "Do you ever think about him?" he asked, referring to Damien. "Occasionally," I admitted, "but he is no longer relevant. The past is gone. The future is ours." We watched the city together, the hum of life below mirroring the hum of Orion running flawlessly on secure servers. Every deployment, every client integration, every innovation would be executed under our own rules, guided by our own principles. There was no external threat, no hidden adversary, just clarity, capability, and autonomy. Weeks passed. Our small startup grew rapidly. Engineers joined, drawn by the culture of trust, integrity, and innovation. Clients expanded globally, attracted by Orion's unique capabilities and the assurance of stability and security. Media began covering our story, highlighting the team behind Orion, the triumph over corporate manipulation, and the vision that now guided the project independently. The contrast with Heliction could not have been more stark. Damien's name had vanished from discourse. Heliction tried to assert control, attempted subtle influence, but our evidence, preparation, and impeccable execution left them powerless. Orion's reputation as a reliable, independent, and expertly managed system spread rapidly. Late one evening, I sat in the office, looking over projections, analytics, and development pipelines. The soft glow of monitors cast reflections across the polished tables, screens displaying live data, client metrics, and system performance. I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was more than a business victory, it was the culmination of strategic planning, resilience, and the refusal to compromise one's principles. Marcus approached with a cup of coffee. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked. I shook my head, smiling faintly. "Not when it's like this. Not when every day we prove what we can create, not what others tried to take from us." The office was quiet except for the hum of servers and keyboards. Outside, Manhattan streets glimmered in the night, alive and unknowing. Yet for the first time, I felt that our influence was undeniable. Our creation, our rules, our vision, all protected and thriving. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet settle over me. Damien's threats, manipulations, and attempts to control had been neutralized. Heliction's board had been navigated, the legal strategies executed flawlessly, and Orion's core integrity remained intact. The team was unified, the infrastructure secure, and the market was recognizing the value we had built independently. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine the future without limits. A space where innovation was not constrained by bureaucracy or malice, where vision and capability defined outcomes. Every line of code, every decision, every challenge overcome had prepared us for this. I whispered quietly, almost to myself, "This is freedom. This is creation without compromise. This is what we have earned." Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder, and for a moment we simply stood, looking out over the city. The hum of Orion in the background was a heartbeat, steady and assured. "This is only the beginning," I said, voice soft but resolute. "And from here, everything we build will belong to us." Outside, the city lights reflected endlessly on wet streets. I thought about the journey from the cornered boardroom, the midnight threats, the strategic battles, the twists and legal maneuverings, to this moment of clarity and empowerment. Every choice had been deliberate, every risk measured, every step calculated. Damien had been defeated, Orion was secure, and the team's autonomy was absolute. The future stretched out before us, limitless. I allowed myself one deep breath, feeling the culmination of months of tension, struggle, and triumph. Victory had been achieved not through force or intimidation, but through foresight, preparation, and unwavering resolve. And as I looked over the lights of the city, the reflections of Orion's servers, and the faces of the team working tirelessly, I knew this was only the beginning of everything we could create, unshackled, unopposed, and fully our own. Freedom had been won. Control had been reclaimed. The story was ours.